Welcome, everyone. I am Heather B. Moore, and I'm very excited to be here with Vischer Elliott today. And I will just have her say hello to everybody. She is our heroine of the book, Under the Java Moon.
Wow. Hi, everyone. It almost makes me cry to think I'm a heroine. That's so funny. Yes, welcome to all of you. At first, I did not enjoy it very much because I was crying so much, and all my feelings of the period of my life that was so hard for me to go through. And I was actually thinking, do I really want to do this? But I realized it's history, and it's my family's history, and my children needed to know.
I remember when we first met, I think it was 2021 in August, and you were in my home state. I live in Utah, and you had come to visit a really good friend of yours. And so I brought my husband with me to visit with you, and this is before like you had agreed to have the story put into a book, and before I agreed to write it. It was just more of we were meeting and kind of testing each other out, I guess. But I remember you just you told not only the story of your experiences in Indonesia during the war, but also everything that came after, which I think is also an amazing story. And I remember leaving, and you walked us out to the car, and you said, this is how I grew up. As a common courtesy is when your guests leave, you walk them out to the car. So I thought that was very sweet too. But I was very impressed with just not only had you gone through hard things, but how you live your life now. Because like you said, you share it's not just sharing your story and your experiences, but you share your faith with other people just very openly. And you also attribute that to how you've gotten through all the hard times in your life that came even after the war.
Thank you.
But I did want to ask you a couple of questions. So what was going through your mind kind of when you first started thinking, maybe I should share my story, to when you actually got to the point where you agreed and took that step of, yes, Heather can write my book now?
Yeah. Well,
what was that process like?
Okay. So first of all, I was very impressed with you, Heather. You seem to be such a personable person and kind of empathetic, sympathetic, empathetic. And the other thing helped towards it is that I had been dreaming for a few years that I am going to write a book. And I thought to myself, my goodness, I'm not a writer. And if I were to write the book, it would just be all the facts that I had given you, factual. And it wouldn't be a readable story. You made it into a readable story, and mine would be factual. And there was a friend of mine at church who said she had written 1 or 2 books, and she would write the story. But I wasn't too much inspired. And I don't think I was ready yet either, because I thought to myself, what am I going to say to her? How am I going to put this? But having met you, I felt more at ease and more responsive to do this. And I already knew by then that the story had to be written for some reason or other, because I had those dreams.
Yeah. On our second meeting, I think that was after we had already agreed to do the book. And I felt like I should send you maybe like several chapters as I wrote them, even though I usually don't like send my manuscript out to be reviewed until it's mostly done. I felt like with your story, I wanted to make sure I was going in the right direction, and also that it was capturing the personalities of your family, your brother, Georgie, and then Robbie, who was born later, and your grandma, your Oma, and your parents. So that as we did that, I remember you saying, "Oh, I just remembered this," or "I had forgotten this, but now I want, I want to make sure this is in the story." So that was kind of an interesting process. So what was that like, having some of your memories return?
Yes. Well, I was grateful for you doing that, because, and I didn't know how or what you were going to do, but then when you suggested you send me a few chapters, and I thought, well, that makes sense. Before we do the whole story, let's do it bit by bit.
Yeah.
So we're getting the right events and the right way it took place, So otherwise it would have been too much to have to go through. So just repeat the actual question.
Oh, I just was wondering what it was like for you to have some of those memories return. That, not that you had forgotten them, but you just hadn't thought about them for so long.
Yes, and I'm sure what it was like. Okay, it was very interesting, an interesting process, because all of a sudden I'm remembering, yes, this happened and that happened. And because I was reading it, what was in the back of my head for many years buried had actually come forth. And, because of the way you wrote, so with such compassion and feeling that my feelings were kind of coming back and, remembering.
I remember you also telling me that when the war was over and your family was repatriated back to the Netherlands, that your parents, especially your mother, didn't want to talk about the war anymore. And so kind of just in that way, you didn't either, even when I think you said it was your sister, your younger sister, that would ask you questions, but you didn't realize you kept just brushing them off. Do you feel like that is very common for survivors of different wars, like just to not want to talk about it?
You know what? I have no clue, because the only person that I contacted after, in fact, yes, my parents were still very friendly with the Venema's, and we only lived in Holland for 5 years. So when I came back to Holland, the very first time, I contacted Ina in the book, Ina Venema, and we spoke somewhat about the war, and that's how I actually know about her, what she had to do, and how hard it was for her, and to do what she did. And and she also told me the story that the job she was in, she had to actually entertain a Japanese convoy, a group of Japanese people. Her boss asked, because of the kind of work, I think she worked for an international company in Holland, and this group of Japanese were coming over, and she had to entertain them, and she totally refused. She said,
Right.
I'm going to cry. She said that, I can't do this. I'm not ready. It was kind of probably only about 6 years, because I was 17 the first time I went back there, and I left at 14. So, and I got back from the war. I was back. What age was I? 9.
Yeah, I think you're about 9.
Yeah, I turned 9 in March, and I went back to Holland again when I was 17. And so that would be 7 or 8 years later. She still was not ready to entertain because of the work she had done. Because it was really hard what she did. She was in contact with dead people every single day of her life. So that was really hard for her. And she said, Mary, Ita, I could not do that. So So yeah. So that's actually the only person that was in the same concentration camp as me that I ever contacted, and that was her. That was her story. And I think it depends. My dad did, hence not at first.
Yeah.
He only wrote the memoirs in South Africa. So that
Okay.
was also many years later for my father. So it was in Holland, and the first years in South Africa, nobody ever spoke about the war, ever. So neither of my parents did.
Yeah, I think it would have been difficult to not only have all of these refugees and Dutch people coming into Holland from Indonesia, where some of you, I mean, had never lived in Holland, but you were sent back there. And then now, how do you live? I mean, that country had been occupied by the Germans, and it was war torn, and it, was recovering itself. And so I remember I read some of the memoirs. Some of the families would come back, and there wasn't room, to stay with an aunt or grandmother, and so they had to separate the families.
So, because the majority of people went back or went to Holland because they were Dutch, but a lot of the Dutch people went to America and Australia, Canada, because a lot of them felt that Holland was so war torn that they probably couldn't face going back, and maybe some of their family had died in the war and they didn't want to go back.
Right.
So a lot of people did go to, and hence in America, I'm so astonished of all the Dutch last names, surnames that you have in this country. In my work, I have met so many. I met one gentleman who went to Canada, and he wasn't in the war or anything, but I think he was born after the war. And then now he was in America. And I asked him, I said, do you speak Dutch? He said, very little. But he was 19 when he went to Canada. And how old was I? I was 14 when we went to South Africa. And I still speak Dutch. So, but I made it a point to do so. And for him, it probably wasn't important. So, but he spoke a few words. So.
And your children were all born in South Africa. So did they learn any Dutch from you?
Did they what?
Did they learn any Dutch from you, your children?
No, the only reason, and my one son, Dean, who read the book and was very impressed, and he doesn't read books, he was always very sorry, or he kind of chided me in not teaching my children Dutch. However, they had the second language in South Africa is Afrikaans. If you go to an English school, if you go to an Afrikaans school, the second language is English. So my children had to learn Afrikaans, and for me, it was very difficult to learn pure Afrikaans because it was so close to Dutch. Maybe like Portuguese and Spanish. I don't know. But it was very hard, and I was always chiding the teacher. No, that's not how you say it. That's how he says, yes, but this is Afrikaans. Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't want my children to have such a hardship in learning Afrikaans, and knowing Dutch, then Afrikaans would have been harder for them to learn. And I had no idea that any of us were going to immigrate again. So Afrikaans was the second language. Afrikaans was what they had to learn. So let that be it,
Right. So you've lived in 4 countries because you were born in Indonesia, right?
I was, yes.
So you were born there. And then tell us a little bit about what you remember, just kind of your early childhood before you guys went into the camps.
I remember us going on. It was outside of Jakarta. It was wild. It was what do you call it again? A thick, heavy forest, a rainforest. And it was wild. So so going on vacation, it was really, really in the wilds. And it was usually in the mountains, and it was cold, even though Indonesia is right on the equator. And so it's a hot climate, but in the mountains, it was really cold. And we rode on horses, and they had farms. And I remember rolling down the hill into the rainforest, was right at the bottom of the hill, and rolling down there and having fun on the grass and playing. And yes, and I remember our home, I learned to speak Malay, but I only remember a few words. And the funny part of it is, in Afrikaans, there are a few Malay words because there was a contingent of Malay people that immigrated to the Cape in South Africa. So, and that's why these words got into the Afrikaans language.
That is really interesting. I remember you told me you like to climb trees, and you just love to be outside. And so that sounds like a very fun childhood, of course, until things changed for everybody. Tell us a little bit about your brothers that are in your book. Georgie was your best friend and playmate, and then Robbie was born in the internment camp. What maybe you as an older sister, like what your relationship was with them?
Well, my mother tells me that when Georgie, I was an only child up until Georgie was born, and I was the bad twos when he was born. And my mother tells me that my little brother Georgie was given so much attention that I was actually a little bit jealous when he was a baby. But, you get over that and you realize it's your brother, and then you start loving him and protecting him, as an older sister. And I did. I grew into that. And I grew into, since after Georgie, I had another 3. So there were actually, my mother gave birth to 5. So there were another 3 children after him, Robbie, Amy, and Eric. And I became the big sister, and I protected them, and I love them. Oh, I love them dearly, all of them. I'm the eldest, so yes.
One of the things that really stuck out to me when you shared about being in the camp is how your mom found this big, you said you didn't know how she found it, but she brought you this big book.
Oh, my.
And that really just became like kind of a lifeline for you to.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. And I always loved reading, although I don't do it so much now because of my eyes and because I am an outdoor person, basically. So I do a lot of hiking and walking and pickleball and you name it, I try and do it. In winter, I do snowshoeing and I work 1 to 5. So I don't have a lot of free time available. So, and because of my eyes, I don't do a lot of reading, but I read something every day, a little bit.
Right.
So, but that book, and I don't know what happened to that book. I honestly don't know, but it had scribbles on it, and it had a couple of torn pages and everything, but it was thick enough for me. So my mom taught me to read in Dutch, of course, and to do basic arithmetic. So I was able to, at first she read it to me and to us, and then I was able to read it. It had poems in it, and it had short stories, verses, and it was just, oh my goodness. I hung on to that book for life. And we probably had to leave it behind because, in the concentration camp, because there were more important things that we needed to probably take with us. So.
Yeah. So my other question is after you went through all these experiences and you had your own children, did you share your war experiences with them, or did you wait until they were adults?
I don't quite remember. I did tell my husband that I was in a Japanese concentration camp and in my youth, and that was the end of that. We didn't discuss. He did know that I suffered extreme hunger, extreme. You can only say totally extreme. And I didn't want any food to go to waste. I was absolutely, what is the word? I can't think of a good word, but
Yeah.
I was very, 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 so, and my children, obviously when they're young, you don't tell them, but as they got older, I did tell them that I suffered hunger in the war, concentration, and we had no food.
Yeah.
You can basically say no food. So there was no wasting of food in the house. So what I do, and I still do it, I buy perishables, put it in the fridge. I come home every night and I look in the fridge and I think, oh, this has to be cooked. So I have to cook that and I eat that, because I don't buy things. I mean, I have my likes and dislikes now, and
Right.
some things I don't eat because they're fattening, and at one stage with my children, what they left, I used to eat. I used to eat what they had left, what they didn't, when they were younger, because you can't force a baby or a little child. So they left it and I was eating it. And then all of a sudden I said to myself, you can't do that, Mary, because you're going to get so fat. And I really do watch my figure. So what I did, I would not eat and then just eat their leftovers, and that would be my lunch or dinner, whatever.
So I imagine that you have a lot of recipes from different countries that you love. I know one time when I visited you, you gave me some shortbread, or actually I think it was when my daughter took you to the airport or something. I think you gave.
Shortbread. Yes.
Yeah.
So shortbread is actually a Scottish-British thing.
Okay.
But South Africa is more English as versus American. Like we get the English movies and we get more British food, because a lot of British people were living in South Africa. So it was more into the British things. So yes, I have two things that I make from Indonesia, and that is nasi goreng and bami goreng. And bami goreng is made with chicken. Nasi goreng, you can put anything in it, even fish. And then, of course, Holland. Well, what? Oh, yes, I have got a couple of recipes that. And sauerkraut is actually more German, but they eat it in Holland. So I like sauerkraut. And my kids used to get, we called them frikadelles. They were round. What are they called again? You eat them here too. Mince meat, round balls. Meatballs. Meatballs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a Dutch thing. Meatballs and sauerkraut, and then they have a couple of things called van der Mijns gestampte pot, which is kind of a mixture of mashed potatoes, onion, and carrots.
Okay.
With spices. And I don't make those things so much anymore, but I do make nasi goreng. My kids love nasi goreng. So and so does the rest of my family, like my siblings and that. They love nasi goreng too, so I'll make it for them. And from South Africa, so we've had Dutch, now South Africa. It's gone. Oh, curry, because in South Africa we have a lot of people from India, the country India, and Pakistan, India and Pakistan. So, like here, Mexican is one of the main dishes. In South Africa, it's curry and rice, Indian curry and rice. Oh my goodness! Yes, I I love it. And I make that. And you can make it with chicken or beef or mutton, lamb.
Mhm.
I like lamb curry. That's my favorite.
Nice.
And of course, the shortbread cookies. And then they have fat cook. That is an Afrikaans thing. And one of the things that the Afrikaans people like, they always put a bit of sugar in their vegetables. But I don't do that because I'm Dutch. Basically, fundamentally, I'm Dutch.
Right.
So I wouldn't put sugar in my vegetables. But it's an Afrikaans thing.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if I've had that before. I haven't noticed if I have. But anyway, well, this has been really fun to talk to you, and I'm very excited for everyone to hear your story. I've already heard from other people that are descendants of those who are in the camps in Indonesia, and they've been very excited that some of these stories are finally being told and coming to light. So thank you again. And is there anything else you want to say? Just want to say goodbye to everybody, or?
Well, and I'm interested. Have you heard from people that were actually in the Chideng camp or in other camps in?
So a couple of people I've heard from, they said their grandmother it wasn't the Chideng camp. It was another camp.
Yes.
It was on Java as well.
Okay.
And the grandmother actually wrote her story, and it was something that she self-published. So I just bought it, and I'm going to read it. Hopefully.
Oh, she actually published it?
Yeah.
Her grandmother's story?
Yeah.
Well, if you could send me that information.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
So up to now, I haven't read, apart from my own book, I have not read any. I have read a little bit of the Holocaust in Europe. I wanted to be a little bit familiar, so I've read a little bit about that. But any of the camp books, in the ones that I mentioned to you, I have not read, and I don't know if I will ever read them, Yeah. But it's interesting to hear that story about the grandma.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, say goodbye to everyone. Bye-bye. And it's nice.
Thanks.
And I'm so grateful that you are interested in the book, and just spread it far and wide now, because, it has been released, and I now am living with it. And one thing I want to say is too, that my mother would never have told the story like I did, but I feel close to her, and I feel that she is now okay with it. I feel her vibes, and I feel that she's happy with it, and she's okay with it. So thank you, Heather, for doing
it. That's awesome to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.